Two women who dated the same man 8 years apart wound up dead. Some people believe it was more than just tragic accidents. But before we get started, welcome to True Crime with me, Anteater. If you love all things true crime, including missing person cases, cold cases, and just the strange happenings of the world, you've come to the right place. Be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. Let's get started. In December 2010, a 24-year-old named Phoebe Handsjuk was living in Melbourne, Australia in a high-rise luxury apartment. Phoebe was an avid climber and martial artist. She was beautiful, she was brilliant, she was bright, she lit up a room when she came in with her smile. But on December 2nd, 2010, that would all change with a tragic accident. On the day of this reported accident, Phoebe had spent the day drinking and eventually took some sleeping pills. She was actually 3 times over the legal limit. At around 11:44 a.m. that day, Phoebe can be seen leaving the apartment with her dog because the fire alarms went off. She would return shortly after. Supposedly, Phoebe eventually went to the garbage chute, which was 12 stories up. So basically, you open this little garbage chute, you push your garbage bags down, you close it, your garbage goes down to a room with like a bin so the garbage can fall into it. So supposedly on this day, Phoebe went out of her apartment, she opened the garbage chute, she climbed up in and fell 12 stories to her death. Eventually, her boyfriend would come home and it was his apartment, and he would describe this scene as disarrayed. He said that her handbag, her keys, her security key for the apartment were all on the table still, but there was no sign of Phoebe. Apparently also inside the apartment were 2 wine glasses, but they were never dusted for prints. Phoebe's blood was also found in the apartment, along with a broken glass. So the coroner suspected that Phoebe had broken a glass, she cut herself, she cleaned the glass up, and went to the garbage chute to dispose of the glass. But unfortunately, people would soon realize that theory really didn't fit the evidence. Eventually, police were called, and they soon learned that Phoebe actually went feet first down the garbage chute. And as she went down that chute, she actually fell into the trash compactor, and her foot was nearly severed off because of this. Investigators would not find any of the broken glass from the apartment that supposedly would have been in the chute had she thrown that broken glass away. They also never found blood or fingerprints on that trash compactor handle, so when she went to open it, if she had been bleeding, there would be blood. If obviously she opened it, her fingerprints would be there. There's also other inconsistencies, like she had bruising on her arm, and it seems to suggest that perhaps before her fall, she was grabbed. Police would actually suspect that Phoebe committed suicide, while the coroner went on to say that he believed it was a freak accident. But this case really was botched from the beginning. For starters, they neglected to secure all the CCTV footage on the block. They also never seized any computers or electronics from the apartment. They were obviously operating under the assumption that she either had a freak accident or committed suicide, which meant that they didn't bother to investigate this as a potential crime. And when Phoebe's family was finally able to obtain her laptop, they realized that all her outgoing emails had been deleted. Phoebe apparently also had 2 phones. One was an iPhone and one was a Nokia. But only one of those phones was ever found, and that was the iPhone. The Nokia phone has actually never been located, and that's incredibly suspicious. So not only did they not collect video footage, they did not collect electronics, they did not dust for fingerprints. That all seems very, very suspicious to me. And that is why you don't work under the assumption that it's an accident or obviously a suicide, because you miss a lot of things, potential clues. And let's talk about that garbage chute for a second. Police actually never conducted experiments to try to prove that Phoebe herself could put herself in that garbage chute, having her feet downwards, not head first, her feet down. And as we can see by this garbage chute, it looks nearly impossible to put yourself in that. It would require a lot of strength. And remember, Phoebe had 3 times over the legal limit of alcohol in her system and supposedly sleeping pills. I could not imagine that she could get herself into that garbage chute feet first. So eventually an outside group, not the police, would investigate this and actually conduct an experiment to see if somebody could actually do what Phoebe supposedly did. Climb in feet first and throw herself down a chute. So they got a model of the same age and build to see if she could lift herself up and get herself into that garbage chute. So it's important to note that detectives concluded that Phoebe had to have her arms by her side as she went down that garbage chute that night. After multiple failed attempts, the model was able to get into that latch, but only with her arms directly above her head. And they said that it was nearly impossible that she could start with her arms above her head as she's going down and then put them by her side. It was such a small, compact space. It just was not possible. And for reference, that chute, like the size of it, it's pretty much the same size as an average laptop size. So that should give you really a kind of a good idea of how small that is. They also said that if she had gotten into the chute herself, her fingers would be injured because the chute would snap back into place. But the pathologist said there was no injuries to her fingers at the time of her death. And apparently, when Phoebe was found, she was found with her jeans below her knees. And for whatever reason, police believe that she could not only get into the chute, even though she had 3 times the legal amount of alcohol in her system, but also do so not leaving any fingerprints. That's a little mind-boggling to me. They would do another experiment where a man would pick up this model, take her to the garbage chute, and put her in it. And he did so with relative ease. So this team of investigators believe that Phoebe was most likely placed in the chute. And when she went down the chute, feet first, hands at her sides, she fell into the compactor where her leg was basically almost severed. She then slumped into the machine and her hip was sliced open by the blade of the compactor. But the steel trapdoor actually opened and she fell out. And she fell into this dark room and she's trying to find her way out. But eventually she dies from blood loss. And apparently in the US, there was 2 cases of this happening in 2010 and 2011, and they were ruled accidents. But the residents of the building didn't feel that way. And the dead person in those cases actually went headfirst down the chute, which was significantly different than Phoebe, who went feet first. At the age of 23, Phoebe would actually meet her then boyfriend, whose apartment she actually died in. She was working as a receptionist for a hair salon, and that's how she met 39-year-old Anthony Hampel. He was a handsome events promoter, and his father was actually a Supreme Court judge, and his stepmother was a county court judge. After dating for 5 months, the two would actually move in together in 2009. And then over the next 14 months while living together, Phoebe began to drink extremely heavily. She even told her psychiatrist that Anthony was very verbally abusive, and she had apparently managed to leave him 4 times over the 6 weeks before her death. But somehow Anthony always got her to come back home. And unfortunately, the last time she made it back would be her last. Anthony was described as controlling and possessive of her. And really, right from the start, her family believed that she had been murdered. Her grandfather was actually a retired police detective, so all of these things started adding up for him, and they did not make sense. It was not an accident, and it certainly wasn't a suicide. Her grandfather claimed that other than the wine glasses, there were actually large footprints leaving the apartment. In 2014, there was an inquest into Anthony, and Phoebe's mother actually raised all the money for the proceedings, but it would end in his favor. But a lot of people are very suspicious of Anthony. Apparently, he had eaten a sandwich and drank a beer even after noting there was broken glass and blood in his apartment. That seems a bit strange to me, but this case only gets stranger. In 2018, Anthony would actually go on to date a woman named Bailee Schneider. She was a 25-year-old model and she was absolutely stunning. Baillee grew up in Queensland, Australia, but at the age of 19 moved to Melbourne. Baillee actually enrolled in a dental assistant program and worked part-time as a fashion merchandiser. Unfortunately, these modeling gigs brought her into a lot of nightclubs, and because of this, she began to drink a lot and started to use cocaine. Eventually, this would leave her just absolutely anxious and depressed. And in 2017, Bailey's parents actually moved to Melbourne to help their daughter get back on track. She would move back in with her parents and actually enrolled back in college. In 2018, Baillee would actually arrive home from Bali. She was on a short modeling gig, and she would tell her parents that she was actually dating a 51-year-old man. And this man was 51-year-old Anthony Hampel, the same man whose girlfriend supposedly committed suicide or had a freak accident by falling down his garbage chute. On June 22nd, 2018, Baillee told her parents that she was going to a barbecue at Anthony's house and that she would be spending the night there. But instead, she actually went to a nightclub where she worked as a dancer from 6:45 to 1 a.m. And then at 1:08 a.m., she took a taxi to a prestigious neighborhood and went to a party there. And apparently while she was there, she spent the majority of the night arguing with her boyfriend Anthony via text message. And her friends would go on to note that she seemed really depressed. She was not having a good time. She just looked awful. At 8 a.m., Baillee would actually take a taxi cab home and go home to her family. But around 10 a.m., Bailey's mother would actually find her sobbing alone in her bedroom. And she was in the midst of a serious panic attack. And she would tell her mother that her and Anthony just broke up and that their worlds were just too different, and she was really just devastated by this. Her mom sat with her for some time and talked to her and tried to work through it with her. Obviously, she didn't want to leave her alone. When she felt like Baillee was okay, her and her husband actually went to get some groceries. When they left, Baillee was just sitting on the couch watching some Netflix, and her older brother was actually in his room in the back of the house. But when Bailey's parents returned home, they would find their daughter in the kitchen, lying on the floor. There was blood dripping from her nose, and a curtain tie had been wrapped around her neck. Bailey's dad, of course, cut this off, and he began to administer CPR, and they called 911, but unfortunately, it was too late. Baillee was dead. The autopsy determined that Baillee actually had quite a few substances in her body at the time. She had Zoloft, Xanax, and cocaine in her system. They would also determine that she had 3 times the legal amount of alcohol in her system, and that should sound familiar to you because Phoebe also had 3 times the legal amount of alcohol in her system when she was found dead. They found a half-empty bottle of wine in the kitchen. The coroner would rule that this was a suicide. They said she was very depressed, she was going through things, she had just broken up with her boyfriend, and had a history of depression and anxiety, but her parents did not agree. And the parents would argue with the coroner. They said there was nowhere for her to hang herself in the kitchen, and she couldn't do it herself. She wasn't tall enough. And the coroner said, well, maybe she did it off a kitchen cabinet. The case was eventually ruled as not suspicious and closed. Apparently, Bailey's older brother Ryan had witnessed Baillee outside in the garden talking on the phone. He said that she appeared really stressed out and upset while she was talking, but she did make a hand gesture at her brother, letting him know that she was okay. And Anthony was actually the last person that Baillee spoke to, just like Phoebe had. Apparently, a few weeks before Bailey's death, there was actually a deep cut found on her arm, and police believe that it was a suicide attempt. But remember that Phoebe also had bruising on her arm when she was found, and they believe that it was done prior to being thrown into the garbage chute. Apparently, Bailey's parents had never met Anthony, and Anthony himself claimed to police that him and Baillee weren't in a serious relationship. But Baillee had told her parents that this man was her boyfriend, and based on phone records, they realized that they probably are in quite a personal relationship considering they had frequent communication. They went away at least twice together, so it was very strange. So apparently Anthony Hampel moved out of that apartment and moved on with his life. He is happily married now. So this case really is quite suspicious. I really don't know if I believe entirely in just coincidence that keep reoccurring. Of course, a coincidence once, sure. Twice, I think it needs some serious investigation. I also firmly believe that Phoebe did not enter into that garbage chute by herself. I believe she was placed in there. And if you watch the reenactment of the model doing the same thing, she struggles. It's very hard for her to get in there. And obviously, if the only way she can get in with her hands above her head, there's some issues here. We must conclude that obviously the prime suspect, his parents, were in a place of power. I think that kind of plays into this. So even if he wasn't the one who committed this crime against Phoebe and possibly committed against Baillee, that's a bit suspicious. So Bailey's case is also really suspicious. I have a hard time believing it was suicide, although it very well could have been, right? If we look at the facts, she was having a really hard time. She was struggling with drugs and alcohol. She was struggling with depression and anxiety. She drank a lot. Suicide, theoretically, could have happened. Do I believe it happened? No. But I also thought that her brother Ryan being home and not witnessing anything was really suspicious. So he said that he saw his sister in the garden on the phone and he noticed she was in distress, but she waved him away. She was okay. Presumably he goes back to his room. He doesn't come out until his parents get home and they find the body. Theoretically, if somebody had come over, the prime suspect, her boyfriend at the time, wouldn't he have heard them? Wouldn't he hear them talking? Wouldn't he hear them struggling? Wouldn't something be amiss? So for me, that just seems really suspicious, and I don't know, it just feels like something is missing in that link. I don't know how it would happen, but it just feels like he would hear something. Maybe not. I'm also not pointing fingers at the brother Ryan. I can't find any information on the investigation if it looked at him. But again, I just feel like there's a lot of questions there that need answering. So, of course, I'm going to give you guys my theory. I firmly believe that Phoebe was murdered, and I firmly believe that somebody put her down that chute. But I do believe the prime suspect, which is typically always the boyfriend or husband or the partner, is a good place to start. I believe that he was abusive, and that was even noted by her therapist. And there's just too many similarities between Phoebe and Baillee to ignore them. I think that the Phoebe case should be reopened. I think they should really work hard to see what actually happened that day. And I understand why there's so much commotion around this case. 2 women dated the same man, 8 years apart, and they both wound up dead by either an accident or quote unquote suicide. It just seems too suspicious to not dive into. But I would love to hear your guys' opinions on this case. I know a lot of you have theories, and I've been really meaning to get to this case. It was suggested by a viewer, and I was really excited to cover it. So let me know in the comments below your theories on this case. I would love to hear them. I would love to know if I'm missing anything. You guys are always teaching me something in the comments and giving me a different theory or a different perspective, and I really love that. But that's it for today, guys. If you like this video or any other video on my channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. If there's a case you'd like me to cover, pop it in the comments below, and I'll promise to get to it. Check out some other videos on my channel while you wait for an upload, and I'll see you next time.